How's ba? That means good morning in Lingwa de Planeta, otherwise known as Lidepla or LdP. ¿Qué es Lidepla? What is Lidepla? It's a new kind of constructed international language, or planned artificial language, you could say. Of course, many people have heard of Esperanto, which is the most successful of the constructed languages, and there have been many others that have been proposed throughout the years with varying levels of success. What most of the previous planned languages have in common is that they have a rigid structure of how the words are derived, or perhaps if the words are taken from national languages, natural languages, they tend to come from only one language family. They maybe only take from European languages, or even more specifically, only from Romance languages. So you wind up with these so-called Euro clones. What's different about Lidepla is that it takes words from a broader variety of sources. It draws words from the top 10 to 12 natural languages, both from Europe as well as from other parts of the world. So it includes words from Mandarin Chinese, for instance. It includes words from Hindi. It includes words from Arabic, as well as words from Spanish, French, English, German, Russian, and then other sources as well. The ones I just named are the primary sources. And then it marries that with a very simplified grammar, which is pretty easy for people who speak European languages to get used to, but it also has features that are taken from non-European languages. In this video series, I'm going to give you some basic lessons in Lidepla, and I'll also point you to more resources where you can learn more. So, let me give you just a little more background before I start in with the actual lessons. The planners of Lidepla are a small group of linguists who live in St. Petersburg in Russia. And they had, in addition to this idea of drawing from many natural languages, not just European ones, the idea of what they call facultative precision, which is a fancy term for saying that the facultative part means that it makes easy things easy. It can be very simple to express yourself, while at the same time allowing you to be as precise as you desire. But the precision is optional. An example of this is with nouns. The words themselves don't really carry the idea of number with them. In other words, singular or plural. For instance, the word for word is worda. And by itself that can either mean word or words. So you could say word, worda. You could talk about two words. Dva worda. And you don't have to change the word to indicate that it's plural. Although if you want to, there is the ability to do that. If you want to say words, you can say wordas. That's an example where the number, the singular or plural, is optional. Another example of that is there's no grammatical gender. You don't have to worry about is it el or la if you're thinking of Spanish. Is it il or el if you're thinking of French. U or a if you're thinking of Portuguese, for instance. Because, after all, many languages get along just fine without grammatical gender. Chinese is a really good example of that. There are ways to indicate if you're talking about he or she, for instance, but you don't have to do that for arbitrary words. Another example of how it's easy is that there aren't any articles. In other words, a and the, because they're not really needed to convey basic communication. Although there are ways to indicate if you mean this book or that book, for instance. So there are pronouns to help you point out things, but you're not forced into saying a or an or the, that kind of thing. All right. And another example of how Lidepla is easy is with the verbs. If you want to, you can just say the basic verb by itself, what we think of as the infinitive form. And it can mean past, present, future, completed action, ongoing action. And if you want to, context can be enough to say, what the intended meaning is. If you need to be more precise, or if you want to be more precise, then there are little markers, little particles that can get added in either before or after to help you indicate, oh, this is in the past, or this is going to be in the future, this is ongoing, or this is completed, that kind of thing. All right. The verb itself doesn't change. You don't have to worry about conjugation. And another example of that is that you don't have to worry about subject-verb agreement. The word for I, which is also the word for me, is me. And the word for speak or talk is shuo. Okay, so if you want to say I speak, you can say me shuo. By itself, that could also mean I spoke, I will speak, I will be speaking. And the context, like I said before, could be enough to help you figure that out. Although if you need to be more precise, you could throw in words like, let's say I want to say I am going to speak. You'd say me ve shuo. The ve is the I'm going to, the future. Okay. Or I spoke. You'd say me shuote. The te at the end is what actually makes that past. Okay. We'll go into more detail with that later on. The word for you, whether you're thinking of it as a subject or an object, is actually just you. Super easy. And like I said about not worrying about agreement, if you want to say you speak, it's you shuo. Okay. And then all of that stuff I was saying about how that could be you spoke, you will be speaking, that kind of thing. If you want to say he, it's, or him, it's lu. Okay. He speaks, lu shuo. Okay. If you want to say she speaks, she or her is ella. So ella shuo. And here's another neat little feature. In English, we don't really have a gender-neutral pronoun. If we're talking about a single person in the third person, and we don't know if we're talking about male or female, we have to resort to saying he or she. Or sometimes they'll always use he, or sometimes they'll always use she, or sometimes they'll alternate. But it's an awkward situation. Other languages don't have this problem. In particular, Chinese has a really elegant way of doing this. The word for he or she in Chinese is just ta. And I'm saying that wrong because I don't have the right tone on it. But ta. Now, in the writing system, it looks a little bit different, so you can tell if you're saying he or she. But in spoken language, it's the same. Ta. And this is something that Lidepla has brought in as well. If you want to have a gender-neutral third person, if you want to say he or she speaks, and you don't really care if it's he or she, you could just say ta shuo. Ta also works for animals, okay, where we maybe don't know or don't care if it's a he or she, or other sort of animate objects. And then we also have, especially in English, we have it, talking about a thing, not a living being. And guess what? The same thing happens in Lidepla. You can say it shuo, it speaks. Maybe you're talking about a computer-generated voice synthesizer. It's speaking. It shuo. Okay. All right, so that takes care of the first person, second person, and third person, what we would think of as singular. For plural, if you want to say we, it's nous, okay, which sounds really familiar to anybody who speaks French. Okay, we speak nous shuo. If you want to say you all, you don't have to actually make any difference. You can just use you as either singular or plural. Although, following this idea of if you need to be more precise, you can throw in another little word, oli, which is all. You ollie. You know, it's kind of like y'all in Southern American English. So you could say, you ollie shwo, or just you shwo. And it would be clear if you're talking to a group that we mean all of you. And then the last pronoun that we have to really talk about right now, well, there's actually two. One of them is they, and that's li. Okay, you know, li shuo, they speak. And we don't have to worry about whether it's a group of all men or all women or mixed or anything like that. We don't worry about that at all. It's totally gender neutral. And then the last one is sort of the indefinite pronoun. If you're just talking about people in general, or, you know, in English we often use they, you know, like they say that it's going to rain tomorrow. Well, here we're not talking about an actual group of they, unless you're maybe thinking of the weather forecaster. The indefinite one would be oni, which actually comes right from Esperanto. The creators of Lidepla pretty much all Esperantists as well, and have a lot of respect for Esperanto. And so there are a lot of common features if you already speak Esperanto that will seem very, very familiar. It also comes from the French on, you know, on dit, you know, one says. And so oni means one or they or people in general. Oni shuo. Okay. So I think that will be pretty much all I want to say for the first lesson, this introduction to Lidepla and then the pronouns. And then we'll get into some more stuff in the next lesson. I look forward to continuing with this, and please leave comments. Swasti, which means bye, or you can also say adieu. Until next time.